Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Huznu Özyeğin, please. And before he comes to us, we have a little video that we would like to present to you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Mozart's The Turkish March. As our hero of Turkish business marches to the stage, ladies and gentlemen, a warm round of applause for Huznu Özyeğin, please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I didn't prepare that video. That was Baybar's product. I cannot play any musical instruments at all, unfortunately. I welcome all of you to this wonderful city of Istanbul for the World Business Angels Investment Forum, committed to globally cooperate and empowering the economic development of the world by fostering innovative final instruments to innovators and startups. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. First of all, I didn't go to the United States with $100, but I started with $1,000. But when I traveled all across the world, so to speak, I took the boat from Izmir to Venice, then train to Le Havre, France. And of course, on the way in Paris, I did go to Folies Bergère. And then I was on a boat, a cruise ship, an old cruise ship, a Greek ship by the name of Arcadia. 8-day trip to Montreal, then Greyhound bus for $99.99 all the way from Montreal, Canada to New York and then to Oregon State. But when I got there, I did have $100 left in my pocket because I paid for all the money on the way. I actually graduated from Robert Academy in 1963, and my dream was to go to the United States to do my undergraduate studies. My first angel investor was my father, who gave me the $1,000. Tuition per semester for Oregonians at the Oregon State University was only $32. If somebody tells you the inflation in the United States is 2% per year, don't believe them. My second angel investor was Mr. Kenneth Litchfield, sort of my American father. I had lived with this family when I went from the United States to Oregon, and 6 weeks before Oregon State started its academic year, I lived in their home under a program called Experiment International Living. So they were sort of my guardians in the United States. Because after I finished Oregon State, I was accepted to Harvard Business School, and I never figured out how and why they accepted me. Because my GPA in my senior year was 2.17. And it was incredible, but then I found out that since I was president of the student body at Oregon State University, which was a university with 14,000 kids, they must have thought I had some leadership qualities. And in my application form, and you could do that at that time, now admissions offices don't accept anything but accept on the internet, I stuffed all my pictures with all the visitors to the campus, like Bobby Kennedy and other very eminent people, and that impressed the admissions office at that time. But I was really disappointed there when I arrived on campus because I started attending classes. I moved into dormitory, Gallatin Hall at HBS campus. And 2 days after the classes started, they called me from the admissions office and they said, "Mr. Özyeğin, are you an American citizen?" I said, "No." They said, "Do you have a green card?" I said, "No." "Well, then we cannot give you a student loan." So there went my dream of Harvard Business School. But at the last minute, I found out that an American could counter-guarantee your loan. That's when I had my second angel come in the picture, and Mr. Litchfield guaranteed my loan. Actually, in the meantime, in my second year at Harvard Business School, I had the chance of my first entrepreneurial action. There was a grill called Gallows Grill in Gallatin Hall, which served sandwiches and hamburgers, especially on weekends and in the evenings, because the cafeteria was closed on weekends. And you could actually apply as a student to run that grill, sort of own that grill for 9 months during your second academic year. And I made a bid for that, and because I had worked there the first year for the $1.85 an hour, so I knew what was going on in that grill. And I was granted the job. The guy that ran that grill before me had 13 employees. I ran it with 3 employees. And I was doing all the cooking, all the cleaning, everything. In fact, on Sundays, there was a major cleaning of the grill, and the previous owner paid the janitors of the school $20 to clean the grill. I didn't even want to pay that $20, so I did that work myself also, the hard cleaning. Anyway, I ended up earning $8,200 in 9 months. I mean, this figure may not mean too much to you, but Harvard Business School tuition per year was $2,000 at that time. So now it's $60,000. So you got to multiply that figure by 30 times. And I paid all my debt to the school. And in fact, I even put some money in the stock market before I graduated. And also, that $8,200 was tax-free because the IRS didn't know I existed at that time. So when I worked for 3 years in the United States as an analyst, then I came to Turkey and started looking for a job. I was about to get a job with a major holding company, and on my way to signing my contract, I stopped by my classmate from Robert Academy, and he said, "You can't go anywhere. I'm offering you a job." And he asked me to join the board of the bank that he had just bought. I told him, I said, "Look, I've never worked in a bank before. I don't know anything about banking." So, but he said, "Yushne, I know you will do this. Please join me." And so I joined him. And 3 years later, he made me the general manager of that bank. So I worked for him for 13 years. And after that, I had the fortune to turn around an almost failing bank. And the Turkish treasury gave me, basically granted me a bank license to a professional banker with basically very little capital. I had about $1 million of cash, million and a half, from my 13 years of bank general managership. And my next angel investor, my wife, allowed me to sell our 2 apartments, in fact, even her car. And we sold 1 to 3% of the bank before the bank was even opened, with a 50% premium to 21 investors. And I was able to retain 65% of the bank with $8 million capital. Only one of those 21 investors did not sell his shares for 19 years until the bank was sold to National Bank of Greece. So he had paid for 1% of 8 million is $80,000 with 50% premium. He had paid $120,000, but he got a $50 million check from National Bank of Greece. So actually the bank was sold for $5.5 billion in 19 years after I founded it. And this was a historic transaction because it was the largest capital inflow into Turkey ever, and it still is, in cash. And it was also the largest FDI flow outside of Greece. And a lot of people, after Greek National Bank bought my bank, thought that Greece actually went bankrupt because they paid too much for Finansbank. I didn't think so. But what was really interesting is that when I founded this bank, I hired 24 people at the outset. We started with 24 people in October 1987. And 15 of them, I hired them from Citibank. At that time it was Citibank, now it's Citicorp. Citicorp Istanbul. These were young men and women between the ages of 27 to 32. And we grew together, and these 3 or 4 of these employees became the top management of the bank that I founded. And 19 years later, the second bidder for Finansbank was Citibank. And Chuck Price personally called me. He said, Hüsnü, you hired 17 people from us. He learned all about the history. And you founded this bank. Now you're asking us to pay over $5 billion, he said. He actually offered me $4.7 billion after National Bank of Greece. So National Bank of Greece won the tender, actually. So obviously, after selling Finansbank, I continued investing, and I invested in many companies in Turkey, Russia, Holland, Switzerland, Dubai, primarily in financial businesses, but I also invested in non-financial companies as well. However, the most important startup of my life, something from scratch again, has been Özyeğin University in Istanbul. I am more proud of Özyeğin University than any other thing I've done in my life, because I feel that education is the most important element in the development of a country. And I founded a university just like the universities I saw in the United States and lived in the United States. We have a campus about 15 minutes from the second Bosphorus Bridge. And we initially we hired a lot of professors, Turkish professors mostly, but also foreign professors from the United States of America, but Turkish professors who not only studied there, but also taught there. And my goal was to educate young men and women in Turkey, as well as in the surrounding region, to become entrepreneurs. And we established the first undergraduate entrepreneurship program. It's a 4-year program, it's a full license program. And obviously that program also assists other faculties in the university. Besides engineering, law, business, architectural and design schools, we also have the first pilot school in Turkey. We train pilots because aviation industry in Turkey is growing so rapidly that we need 500-600 new pilots each year. And the pilot, when he graduates, he makes 3,500 euros net per month. This salary is comparable to a bank branch manager at the age of 32, 33. The pilot graduates when he's 23 years old. We also set up training programs for angel investors, and Özyeğin University also became the home of Galata Business Angels as well as Revo Capital. My new bank, because I couldn't stop, I bought another bank. I sold the bank for 5.5 billion, then I bought a bank for 60 million euros. It was Millennium Bank in Istanbul. And 7 years ago, it's now called FIBA Banca. And FIBA Banca is becoming completely a digital bank. This is what we're striving for. We will have few brick and mortar branches, but not a lot. And we also set up a company called Finberg. Through this vehicle, the bank invests in fintech companies. We obviously also provide a platform, FIBA Banca platform, for these product development efforts of these startups. So I have a few suggestions to especially the entrepreneurs who are looking for investors, that an entrepreneur's sole goal shouldn't be to find an investment from an investor. A true entrepreneur should be looking for the smart investor who would supply the entrepreneur with his or her network, experience, and knowledge. Because I believe that the most important thing in life is the networking. The reason why I became a banker was because my dormitory classmate owned a bank and he offered me a job. So I know the value of networking is extremely important. And the second failure that entrepreneurs make is that they focus on what to do rather than why to do it. The entrepreneurs tend to think too much and waste too much time on building the product. This leads them to making mistakes on the way. The main focus of an entrepreneur should be to ask why he or she is doing this and for whom. The first step should be to identify the problem you're solving and the owner of the problem. And obviously, the right team is the most important thing. The right team is everything. The entrepreneurs should gather the needed talents and resources for the business to strive and look for partners or qualified team members. And lastly, I talked a lot about the successes I've had. I've had many failures also. And obviously, we also had the first symposium for businessmen that have failed a lot in our university. It was very popular. And one of the most interesting things I did was, since I have a bank in Russia and I have retail business in Russia, because I have the franchise of Marks & Spencer, Gap, Banana Republic, I've had a bank there for the last 20 years. I mean, I have about like 5,000 employees on my payroll on Russia. So I said, I can also have a language school here. I have a university with 9,000 students. I went to a conference of Carlyle in Paris, in the nice Georges V Hotel. Now it's Four Seasons. And this fellow from Carlyle made a presentation about Wall Street Institute that teaches English. And it was a success story in China. That's what the presentation was about. As an entrepreneur, I was so excited and moved with this presentation. I immediately went to this fellow and I said, well, would you give me the franchise for Russia? He said, well, sure, we'll look at it. And unfortunately, they granted me the franchise for Russia. And we were a complete failure. I mean, we opened 4 centers, and we had like almost 3,000 students. But we never made any money. And we were losing like $1 million to $1.5 million a year. And we had to sell it. And you know, when we sold it, the fellow did a great favor to us, because he bought it for nothing, but he also asked us to put $1,750,000 in the company before we leave. So that's a lesson for you. Thank you very much for inviting me here, Baybars. Best of luck to everybody in your endeavors.